So those projects were amazing, but it's what I learned and took away in 2 years that impacted me for life. And the reason that I went into the work that I did, because honestly, I use what I learned every single day in what I do. And it's, I learned by doing, and I had no one else there to say, Gretchen, do this, Gretchen, do that. It was, okay, what's next? And it was just me thinking, okay, how could I help? How could I get this done? And then at times, in all honesty, the villagers saying, we don't do things like that. Like, no, we don't do things like that. And having them push back, and then me saying, okay, all right, so what do I do? Which was fine. I mean, that's when you're in your early 20s, you have to do that no matter where you are. It's okay.
If you want to know how to successfully manage change in an organization, then this is the episode for you. I'm joined today by Gretchen Villegas, who is an international development executive, has worked for organizations ranging from the Peace Corps to the private sector and NGOs in between and all sorts, and has worked in places from the Amazon and Suriname to Latin America to East Africa and more besides. Today we'll be hearing some of the remarkable stories, projects, lessons that Gretchen has learned in those many far-flung places. We're going to talk about the role and importance of knowing your purpose and finding your passion, both in life and in career. The role of happiness at work and why more managers should be paying attention to it. And of course, what all of this has to do with change and achieving it successfully, whatever your organization may look like. So many great stories from a career so far in so many interesting places, and some really important and meaningful lessons there as well for leaders the world over. So stick around and don't miss out.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Gretchen, welcome to Leading with Integrity. It's lovely to have you on the show today. Looking forward to getting into some really deep parts of leadership and more, I'm sure.
Sounds great.
Yeah, so to start us off, over to you really to introduce yourself to the listeners. Tell us a bit about your background, your career so far, and what you get up to today.
Yeah. Well, my name is Gretchen Villegas, and I currently live in Arkansas in the United States. I live here with my parents who retired here and my 3 daughters. We lived abroad actually for 15 years before coming back to the United States. I was managing U.S. government projects through contractors. So I was working for the likes of Land O'Lakes, yes, the big butter company, if you know the big cooperative, as well as the National Cooperative Business Association. I was in Latin America and East and Southern Africa. So if you know where Colombia is, as well as Malawi, Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. Those were the places where I was with my family. So my kids are third culture kids. They grew up basically abroad before coming back, which they always tell me they love to be able to tell everyone that. Because their friends were from all over the world. But I really enjoyed that because right after I finished my bachelor's degree, I was able to go into Peace Corps and go abroad, which was a great opportunity to start my career. And in 2014, I came back to the United States, worked out of Washington, D.C. for a few years, and then moved here to Arkansas, where I am today. I worked at Heifer International for about 5 years in the executive team. Great team at Heifer International. and worked with a CEO who came in from Coca-Cola. So there was a big switch from looking at kind of a charity model and moving that charity model into more of a market-driven approach from a private sector perspective, which was an amazing 5 years, truly for me, of working along with that CEO and executive team, and really being part of that change over that 5 years. Great mentorship, and an opportunity to just experience lots of new learnings for myself and to be part of that for the different teams within the organization. And most recently, I took on a position as CEO of a small NGO out of Pennsylvania, helped a family run NGO since 2004, evolve its model to be more relevant to today so that it could take on funding from bigger donors, such as the US government and larger foundations such as MasterCard, Gates Foundation, Rockefeller, and the like. And today, that foundation is still doing well, and it is now gone back to the family. And I am currently setting up my own business and looking for consultancies where I can help others who want to either branch out their corporate social responsibility or build out their B Corps so that they have more growth, or work with nonprofits that want to increase their revenue. So if you're looking for more strategy or you're looking for more impact, I'm able to come in and kind of help you think through that, and not only think through more impact, but actually help you figure out how to do it and how to execute it and find those funds. So David, that's where I am.
Wow, yeah, so quite a long list. Yeah, so what made you take the leap, as it were, into the private sector?
The private sector. Well, what I understood going through my journey, and I have been working on the nonprofit side, is that when I was working the projects, I always had to reach out to the for-profit to ask them for leverage and support, because the nonprofit funding I was able to unlock through the US government or foundations was limited unless I could unlock funding from the corporations or the foundations. And so I had, for example, I had worked with one large corporation to unlock $35 million of funding towards a project. And that corporation had to be the lead. They had to be the prime lead on the proposal, or we wouldn't have been able to unlock it. They agreed to do that, but they had never done it before. And so I and my team went ahead and worked with the corporation, and it was an agriculture corporation that had gaps in their value chain. It was a poultry value chain with feed, inputs and feed. We helped to unlock that, and we were able to bring in $35 million, help them set up ways to manage it. But then our nonprofit became a grantee underneath that private sector partner. And at the end of the day, the whole package, was up in, around $50 million. So it was amazing where what you can do is you can actually bring more resources together. So in learning that, I realized how much more impact you can actually have when you're bringing consortium partners together. And to be honest, at this point in my career, I truly believe when you're looking at something like sustainable development goals, like we were talking about, when you put private sector first, and when you think like private sector, and how they think, right? How to get things done, how to create wealth and leave it in the community. That's when we're going to start breaking through on some of these global challenges. We need private sector to help make everyone accountable to get things done. And that's why I want to help private sector bridge that gap. I want to bring them into the fold.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me. I don't know how the kind of the funding landscape works in the States, but certainly in the UK for a while now, there's been a big emphasis on commercialization and private company led sort of projects. And I think a big part of that is it's about sustainability, but not perhaps the kind of sustainability we might naturally think of when we're thinking about these kind of projects, but it's more about is the service or the product or whatever it is that results that makes things better or does the good, is that going to sustain commercially? Because if not, then it will stop happening and then we've lost all of that good that it's doing. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Yeah.
And you're right. So it is commercially sustainable, right? Mm-hmm. But also sustainable for the land. You're completely right. It has to be good for people and planet, right? For the climate, it has to be. And most of your expertise, where do they sit? In the private sector. So you're right. So that's another reason to bring in that expertise.
Indeed. So, I mean, what we're kind of dancing around a little bit here is the concept of purpose, and we've hinted at passion, I think, because that's why we're both doing what we do. So, I mean, a kind of a wider question, I guess, and it's an issue that's certainly, particularly since sort of the COVID years and the Great Resignation and quiet quitting, all these kind of things, we're seeing, I think, or have seen maybe it's past tense now, a shift in people's priorities at work. And so purpose is getting a lot of attention even now. Passion, I think, is similar variation on the theme. So for you, like what was it that helps you find your purpose and your passion?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was going into the Peace Corps right after my bachelor's degree. And how I ended up there was during my bachelor's degree, they couldn't keep me on campus. So I went to a college in Iowa where you could graduate by being on campus literally one semester. So I was in Mexico. I was in the UK. I actually worked at Amnesty International for a semester, like internship, which was fabulous. Then I went to do an ethnographic research project in the Basque Country. Then I went to Granada, Spain at the university for a semester. And then I actually went to the U.S. Information Service when it still existed, before it was incorporated into the State Department in Washington, D.C. So I did all of those things and got credit for them, graduated actually early. And when I was graduating, I went to my advisor and I was like, okay, well, like, what's next? Because I was kind of on a track to go into law school, and I'm like, and my professor said, well, you kind of have two things you can do here. You can go get a degree in travel. I think he was kind of laughing at that one. Or, you're taking anthropology and you're taking political science classes. And he said, you love them. Like, I just couldn't get enough of the political science and the anthropology, Spanish courses. And he said, why don't you think about the Peace Corps? Because you like the multicultural, you like to work, you like hands-on, what about, development? Have you thought about that? And I went and looked into it and I signed up. And it was actually quite competitive to get in, but I did get in. I was placed, and I went to Suriname, South America. So not Spanish speaking, African tribe in Suriname, right above Brazil, that little country right in the middle, and lived with an African tribe of 600 people on the river of the Amazon. Was an absolutely amazing experience. I can't say I was happy every day I was there, but I can tell you that I know why I was there, because I found my purpose. And what I realized was that I could be the bridge. I realized that development was not about knowing what to do and coming with all the answers. Development was the bridge of coming, listening, helping to understand where people were today, where they wanted to be, and helping to create the path of where they wanted to go and trying to find the resources of how to help them get there. And I left Suriname knowing that's what I wanted to do. And then I had to figure out how I was going to get the rest of the education to fulfill my purpose.
Not many people, I suspect, will have travelled that much before they've even graduated.
Well, I don't think I would have finished my bachelor's degree had I not been able just to get out.
Yeah.
I learned by doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured out, okay, if I could do this, this, and this, I could get this many credits. I was lucky.
It's better quality of learning as well than if you just stayed in one place and went back and forth to the library every day or something.
I had mentors everywhere. I had mentors everywhere, and they were not in books. Mm-hmm. They were in learning about human rights, right? In the UK, they were about, actually learning Spanish in Spain. Mm-hmm. It was incredible.
Yeah. Not that I'm knocking the library, of course. It still has its role.
I still needed the library for my thesis statement, so
yeah, fair enough.
They still made me do that one.
But that was that one semester at the end, right? So yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. No, interesting. And hearing the way you speak about that work towards the end there as well, it struck me that could actually be quite a good description of leadership as well, is the bridge, helping people find the resources to achieve what they want to achieve, all of those things. I was ticking quite a lot of leadership boxes for me as well. So there you go. You've answered all the other questions. We can start now.
Oh, gosh.
No, I'm not letting you play easily, sorry.
David, that was just the start of my journey. And what it taught me was that, when you graduate from college, you think, okay, now I've got all the answers, right? Whether they came from a book or work, you get this fear of, do I have all the answers? Like, can I go into work and I know how to do everything? And you're like, I need to have the answers. What I realized in Peace Corps was, it's not having the answers. It's about listening and learning where you are, where a community is that needs help, where they want to go, helping them with questions of where they want to go, listening intently and asking more questions to really understand where they want to go. And not just surface questions, but what's the root cause? Like the whole root cause of people are sick. I don't want them to be sick anymore. Well, why are they getting sick? Is it dirty water, right? Is it that you have no clinic? Is it like, what is really causing it? And then once they've figured out, okay, with the questions, why, then it's, okay, how do we get there? What would be the best solution based on where they are? And then it's, okay, research, where are our options that we can go look at, and where might the money come from? That's development. That's development. I had no idea after all my studies that is what development meant. I didn't know.
I'm sure you're not alone in that way. I think most recent graduates, however much they may think they know it all.
Yeah.
Certainly I think back to when I graduated my bachelor's, and yeah, all I really remember was, what do I do now? That was my overwhelming feeling.
Right.
Because it's coming out of a period of sort of, if you include all the college and school and everything before that, right. It was, it must have been a decade of constant education and nothing else.
Yeah.
A few temp jobs here and there. But you don't really understand the workplace, do you, until you get there? Whatever that workplace is.
Exactly. And you know what? That right there, I remember it in every single project I do. Mm. It's what I learned. It's where you are, where are you? Where do you want to go? Are you listening intently enough? Did you ask enough questions? Do you know what the root cause is? Do you know how people are feeling about it? Do you know what your hindrances could be or your risks? Do you know what all your options are? And then do you have enough buy-in to move to that new place and stay there? It's the amazing part to me, David, is that what I learned there after 25 years of work, it's still the same process I go through every time. I've just added some new tools. And it's the same process I teach others who come and work with me and partner with me. That's the amazing thing.
Absolutely. I feel like I have to ask because I'm really curious about what it's like. What's the Amazon like? Like, is it? Because it's very difficult if you've never been there and not
Right.
been to that part of the world. And you read loads about it in the context of climate change and deforestation and all of that sort of thing. But how much of that is accurate and how much of it is just the media sensationalizing it, for example?
Well, I think that is happening in certain areas. So I think there are certain areas in the Amazon that everything that you saw on TV, the leveling of it and whatnot, is happening. Where I was not. Suriname is for the most part protecting the rainforest around the Amazon, because that's where all of the African communities are located. And without that rainforest, they're not able to eat because they hunt. They're not able to plant their food crops because that's where they eat. They eat from the land. They hunt from the land. And it's protection from the sun. So, the cover protects from the sun, really protects from a lot of the animals, because the clearing keeps animals, that would hurt people out. They need to be able to hunt their food. There's not a lot of work because it's you basically go from the city into there's no road going into the bush. So you stop at the river, you get out of the car, and you get into a dugout tree log. There's a motor on the back, and you're told, take off your shoes, because if we flip, you will have to move quickly or the piranha will bite your toes off. And that is no joke. Yeah, no joke. So when I was there, we worked on a water project because the women and children had to walk over a mile to actually get clean water for drinking and cooking from a natural spring and carry it on top of their heads. And so we worked on a project to actually pipe in water. So that was one project we worked on when I was there, and they had piped in water for the village by the time I left, which was amazing. And that was a project we did together, which was, it was a community-owned and managed project, but funded by the Dutch embassy for all of the materials that they needed. And can you imagine trying to bring in all of those materials from, Paramaribo into the village? It was extremely costly, not only to buy the materials, but to bring them in. Think about by boat and all of that. It was just, constantly bringing all of that in for weeks on end. So in that area, the Suriname government did a good job of protecting it. When I was there were no clinics. And so it was, if you get a snake bite, okay, or an animal bite, go see the shaman. That is your best bet. Or wear your gum boots. So number one, wear your gum boots. And two, if you get a bite, go see the shaman. That's your best bet. There were a few midwives there to help babies, birthing babies, but there was no clinic, or doctor. So if you needed to call in, it was a radio that worked sometimes and didn't. So we'd have to wait for the radio to actually call in if we were sick. So yeah, we'd wash our dishes in the river, and you do see about that community at the river. Have you seen where you see at the community at the river where everyone talks and everyone shares information? That is true. That's how you find out what's going on in the village. You have to go wash your dishes morning and night, because if you don't, people will think you're sick. People will come and check on you, And then learning the language, the kids taught me. Thank goodness for the patience of children. It's a tonal language. It's not written. And I'm just so grateful for children with a lot of patience. I did crochet projects, which they turned into micro enterprise projects, which they would crochet. Thank goodness my grandmother taught me to crochet. So we crocheted and brought all the women together. You'd find us sitting there crocheting. If you go on my website, you can actually see me sitting with the children and the women crocheting new projects. Then they figured out how they would take them to town, sell them, and bring back money and do things in the village. I was so proud of them. All I did was teach them how to crochet, and I gave them money for the initial yarn, and then they set up the rest. The other thing we did was to build a new school. And again, the Dutch embassy was the one to give the funds and to bring all the materials out, and the village built it. And I was the one to say, what's the need? What do you want? The school? How are we going to build this? They laid out all the materials, what work they would do, what they needed someone else to do. I helped them write it up. And then I went into the Dutch embassy along with the village leader. I prepped the village leader to present. The village leader presented. And then I got backing of Peace Corps to say this was a real project, and to reference me that this would happen, that this project would happen, and I would, oversee it. And then we were able to access the money for everything. So, what else do you want to know?
No,
Spiders, snakes, rats.
No, I live in Australia for a bit. I know all I need to know about those. Thank you very much. Okay. Run away is my main lesson there. But anyway, wow, that's. So we started that off really with a question about your passion, and it's very clearly come out from all of those stories. Yeah. And then purpose as well. I mean, being able to have such a meaningful impact on such worthwhile projects that make a difference to people's lives. I mean, that's got to be what it's all about, surely.
Yeah, but it was, so those projects were amazing, but it's what I learned and took away in 2 years that impacted me for life. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I went into the work that I did, because honestly, I use what I learned every single day in what I do. And it's, I learned by doing, and I had no one else there to say, Gretchen, do this, Gretchen, do that. It was, okay, what's next? And it was just me thinking, okay, how could I help? How could I get this done? And then at times, in all honesty, the villagers saying, we don't do things like that. Like, no, we don't do things like that. And having them push back, and then me saying, okay, all right, so what do I do? Which was fine. I mean, that's when you're in your early 20s, you have to do that no matter where you are. It's okay.
Yeah, I think it's understanding the local culture and the way they do things, isn't it? Yeah. I think that's important in anywhere you go if it's not what you're used to.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And getting comfortable with it. Just really be comfortable with everything being new. And I think that's why I was okay going into new countries, because I showed up in new countries with my family, without an office, without staff, without anything. And I just had to figure it out. And it was literally saying, okay, what do I need next? How do I get there? What do I do? And I have people asking me, like, how do you show up in a new country without anything? I said, well, you show up and you just create it out of nothing. You figure it out. You find people to help you. You ask questions.
Yeah, one way or the other.
Right. you don't have a choice. You have to figure it out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's the fun of it. That's the challenge, right? It's the fun of it.
Yeah, fair enough. I can see that. Yeah. Not sure I'd do it, but I can understand it at least.
Oh, gosh.
Okay. So, I mean, my next question is going to be, once you'd found what your purpose and passion were, how did it change your approach to life and your career? But I think you've already answered that, really. It's about what you've learned, isn't it? And how you still apply it even today. But is there anything you'd like to add on that?
No, I think one thing I did do kind of strengthen my abilities was I went to the School for International Training for a master's degree when I returned. And the reason I chose that school was because it was great for returned volunteers, Peace Corps volunteers, because you had to have an experience before you entered this master's degree. It's what I call an alternative MBA, because you basically were expected to know, because they fast tracked through, spreadsheets for budgets, writing proposals, that kind of stuff. So I kind of felt like I knew enough about that. It really focused more on multicultural training, experiential adult training, how to be comfortable in, very diverse environments. And everybody in my courses were from different countries. So we were actually training each other. So it was very hands-on, everything that we did. And we were critiquing each other in depth. And I think that was then kind of the second step of more in-depth and becoming more professionalized at what I had learned and digging deeper into how to find root causes, how to find, and how to pitch it, right? How to pitch it to corporations, foundations, how to lead people, right? How to teach others from different countries who are adults, right? And how to really think through a full proposal and impact metrics, and how to tie impact metrics to activities in the right way, and do so from the perspectives of people from other cultures and different countries. So we had people there from everywhere, like literally there were from Asia, from Africa, from Latin America, from the UK, all the European countries. And I would say that was the next step of what prepared me for my career. People I still stay in touch with today. And again, what I take with me in every job that I do. So I would say Peace Corps and that master's degree, I couldn't have done better with what I studied to prepare myself. And I don't think many people can actually, a lot of people can't say what they did or studied to prepare for their career. They actually take with them everywhere they go. And I can't.
Yeah, and I think you're quite fortunate in that. Very fortunate, in fact. I mean, I can't think of a single thing I learned in my bachelor's degree on politics that is useful to me today.
Are you sure?
Apart from, well, maybe like the way you think, like the academic mindset and critical thinking. But even that, I think I learned more from my master's than I did my bachelor's degree. So,
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that speaks to the power of education as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've come across many people that said, oh yeah, I just had to get it out of the way, and then, move on to actually do real work. And I said, well, I'm very fortunate. I feel like I've built on everything and taken it with me wherever I've gone. And the investment of time and energy and money in everything that I've done, has been worthwhile of everything I've done. So, really lucky.
I think part of that maybe is about your own mindset though, and the way that you choose to think about these things that probably not everyone does. And again, maybe there's a cultural difference there, and maybe it's a generational thing. I don't know, but there was a period in this country, at least, where if you wanted to get what was perceived as a decent job, you had to have a degree, and it didn't really matter what that degree was in, unless you wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer.
Yeah. Same thing here in the US.
Yeah. And the government's pushed degrees a lot, and, you know, everyone go to university, and that needs to be the norm and all of this, while simultaneously putting the prices up and putting the funding. But anyway, let's not get into politics again.
Same thing here in the US.
Yeah. And then, I mean, there's a whole debate. Not seen much about it recently, but during my early career, there was a whole debate going on about the way that a degree was being devalued, and as a result of all of this. And I wonder if that mindset is part of the problem. Is I didn't really do it because I wanted to, or because I was interested in the subject. I did it just because I had to have that box ticked if I wanted this kind of job. And
that's unfortunate. I think for me, mine were practical. I think that's why I got so much out of it. I made them practical. They weren't ticking a box. They were practical. They were hands-on. They were experiential. And I knew that with my personality and the way that I was, the way I learned, I couldn't do traditional.
Yeah. I mean, again, fortunate there, I think, to have that kind of self-knowledge at such a young age. Again, I don't think many people have that.
Maybe that was it. But I definitely did not do traditional. I was very, as I say, my alternative MBA and my, graduating my bachelor's as I escaped campus.
Interesting, though. Yeah, there's definitely lessons in there. Definitely.
It can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there you go. Okay, so the whole conversation around purpose and passion in the wider context of the workplace and even in leadership, I think the reason why it's so important these days is that it's linked to whether you're happy in life, certainly, but in your job as well, which tends to mean the same thing ultimately, doesn't it? Because if you're unhappy at work, you're probably going to end up being unhappy everywhere else too. So what advice would you offer then to the leaders, the managers in the audience who recognise that this is something that needs solving, and they want to be better at leading their team so that they are not just productive, which is what most people want as a manager, but also happy, and to achieve that in a way that isn't mutually exclusive?
You need to find joy in your work. And you need to help those who you support at work, those who you supervise, right? You have to help them find joy at work. I've always believed that. You can't be productive if you're not happy. And you can't be, you can't do well and perform well if you're not productive. So what are some of the things that I've done? One thing that's really important is to spend the time. And I've seen this happen so many times when leaders are so busy that they don't spend time with the team together, right? They only do one-on-ones and saying, look, how are you doing on your job and what do you need from me? So only one-on-ones. That's fine. However, when you put a team together and you talk through what is our North Star, right? What's our mission? What's our goal? What gets us up in the morning and gets us excited about work? When you have created a North Star with your team, and if you're the CEO, you have to do it with your entire executive team, and then you have to go a layer down, and then you have to go a layer down, and then you have to go a layer down. That is your job as a CEO. That's it. And if you're not a CEO and you're a head of a department, that is your job as a head of your department. So let's say you're head of a department. You take your department and you take your executive leaders of that department, and that's where you start until you end up with your entire department. And you create that North Star for your department, which is underneath the entire organization. And whether everyone else is doing it or not, it doesn't matter. And this is what I have done in every single organization I've been at, whether the CEO and other department leads are doing it or not. And you don't tell them what the North Star is. You give them the parameters of what everyone else is working in, and you have the team actually use the parameters and define out what that North Star is, right? And let everybody map out how their work contributes to that North Star so that everybody can understand what their contribution is and what is exciting to them. Now, as they're doing that, and you see, okay, this is just checking the box. There's nothing really exciting here. Okay. Then you have to dig a little deeper. And one thing that I normally do is then the next step is let's draw your lines to all the other functions in the organization. Who else are you talking to in the organization? What your work is linked to? Are you linked to a communications function? Are you linked to product management? Are you linked to the new business function? Are you linked directly to the CEO on this project? What is it you're linked to? Okay. And is there some spark of interest and excitement there? Okay. Now, if you're seeing that two people are linked to special projects and that excites them, you know that you've got some daily work that have to get done and two exciting things. So you can really bring people together and say, okay, let's talk about the exciting things that you've been working on and really bring that out and give them a platform to shine. And if you've got two people that are being left out and they don't have something to shine and they're excited about, look for something that you can pull together as special projects, as something you can elevate. And I have actually in the past looked for creative opportunities to bring forward inside a department to get something done, maybe a little earlier, or maybe something that their ideas. So we've generated ideas of things that maybe wasn't on the timeline for the CEO, but we put on our timeline to get people to work together on partner projects to feel good about and to find excitement with. And that has made a huge difference. The other thing is creating platforms to recognize that work. That makes a huge difference. So number one, don't just do one-on-ones. Number two, let people collaborate in a matrixed way. Number three, do not have people work in isolation. That is the worst thing you can do for people. Let them converge around a North Star and let them be part of something more global and give them credit where credit is due.
Yeah, I don't know where to start in responding to that. So I love everything you've said there. I think the bits I love most are the way you talk about having that consistent conversation all the way down all stages, however high or low up you are in the organization. Because, I mean, how many CEOs have we all worked for, the listeners as well, I'm sure, where they decide the vision, they decide the North Star, it goes in a memo or an email, it's fired off to a couple of directors, and then it's their problem to make it happen. It's so important to have those conversations in a consistent way with everyone in the organization. And exactly as you described, work your way down and just make sure that everyone's on that same page. And then the second thing that I love most is you don't set it and impose it upon them. You give them the parameters and then they tell you, this is what we're passionate about. This is why we're working in this organization that you're leading. This is what we think the North Star should be, or the vision, or the values, or whatever it is that you call it in your company.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's called buy-in. That's called
exactly. Yeah. Because no one's, the memo approach is all well and good, but no one's going to buy into that. No one's going to believe in it. Not as much as if they've had a hand in creating it.
Exactly.
And that I think is one of the more difficult tricks of leadership.
Yeah. Well, it takes time. You need to dedicate. If you really care about getting something done the right way, you have to take the time. You have to take the time to do that and show that respect to the people who are working for you, or you will lose your good people.
Exactly. And even that, take the time. Again, we've all heard it from the stressed and time poor manager, haven't we? And, I just don't have time to do this. It's like, well, no, whatever else you're doing, you don't have time for that. because this is your job as a leader. This should be your first priority.
Right.
And
Exactly.
it's, when I hear that, I just, red flags are waving everywhere.
I know. And yeah, so many people, it's more, okay, I got to check the box, do this, do that. And I get it. But the whole organization or company will pay for it at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. In some way or form.
Yeah, definitely.
Either by losing all of your good people, or your organization ends up out of alignment and you are not able to reach your goals, whether it is a revenue goal or it's an impact goal. It doesn't matter. You will get out of alignment. And it's amazing when you go into an organization and you ask, even at senior leadership level or a few levels down, what is your strategy, or what is your mission, or what are your values? And no one has the same answer.
That's awkward when that happens, isn't it?
And I would say 7 times out of 10, it happens.
Yeah.
And then they say, well, we spent so much time on this and training on this. And I said, well, but how did you do it? How did you do it? And, so that's something that I have gotten really, really good at over time. And I mean, that's something that I want to offer as well under my company going forward, is some how to and support and help on how to do that and do it well, if companies are willing to put the time into it. But you have to be willing to put the time into it. It is not I'm going to pay for it one-off deal. No, that's just not it. You have to invest more than the outcome. I think you are responsible for your people. And if you respect your people, you will take the time to do it.
And so on that note, we've possibly covered a few of these points already, but so you, obviously with everything you've done in your career so far, whether it's, helping an NGO or an organization make a strategic change or bringing water to countries in the Amazon, you've obviously worked on a lot of change management projects. I'm sure you have some really interesting experience in that. So I'm going to ask you, what do you think are the key ingredients to making a successful change in an organization?
I've done it various times. So imagine an organization that just hit 60 years old, always managed the same way, had unrestricted money that allowed it to function and have funding in 20 plus different countries, never had to fundraise at all besides the unrestricted money that came easily online. So never had to write proposals or do anything like that. Never had to track metrics, right? Or anything like that. And, just turned in their budget requirements every year. Really didn't do any restructuring or anything like that. And all of a sudden, a new CEO comes in and says, okay, we are going to not do this anymore. We are not going to continue with the charity model. We are not going to do this because we can do better. And we can do better by ensuring that the households we're working with in all 20 countries, when we place an asset with them, we are going to break the cycle of poverty by disrupting the system that's keeping them in poverty. And we're going to make them part of the system. So we're going to break the system of poverty. We're going to bring them inside a productive value chain and give them more knowledge, resources, and assets so they can have a growing farm that will continue to grow inside the value chain. So it could be coffee, it could be spices, it could be a goat farm, it could be poultry, it could be a dairy cow. So whatever it is they're working in, we will look at them holistically But these are families that are vulnerable because they're kept poor, right? So like you said earlier, they're kept under a broker, right? Like a broker relationship. We're going to break that, and we're going to, create farming as a business that in which they can grow. And so that was a new concept. So like a market system type approach. And so I'm invited in, I create a brand new department called Program Effectiveness. And this new department hires in people from the industry that sets up a monitoring, evaluation, and learning unit that helps them track where are families when they start. Once we place the assets and knowledge, where did it go? And then how do they move over time, and how do we track that? Okay. Then we also place some technical experts of, okay, how are we going to change our model over time, right? So it's not just doing X, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And how are we going to train and teach our field staff how to do that? And then how are we also going to look for another section of the team, partnerships, so that we can actually leverage the unrestricted money we put out and look for additional partners and other money like corporations, foundations, and whatnot. So I slowly set all of this up and we start to move forward. Okay. So number one, we need a phased approach, right? 60 years, there is no way this is going to happen overnight. So number one, we need a phased approach. It needs to happen slowly over time, right? And it can't happen overnight. It needs to happen slowly. Okay, phased approach. Number two, your executive leadership from CEO down has to understand the phased approach and has to communicate it transparently and openly of how it's going to happen, and any other initiatives that are going to happen within the organization cannot contradict what your phased approach is going to be. So it has to be really well organized and orchestrated with every other change that's going to happen in every department. So those were the main changes that I described. But every single change in marketing, in the unrestricted, in money going out for the unrestricted, in activities that are going to continue going year after year as we're phasing and changing, all of that has to be orchestrated together and clearly explained and communicated from the top to everyone. Okay. Right. So that was the first thing that was done. We first figured out what change was going to happen in the phased approach, took it to the top. We all agreed on it. And then there was a very clear communication over 5 years of what was going to happen. No one really understood how this was going to happen down here, but that these were the milestones. And it was like a calendar plan, and that there was one person, it wasn't me, that was put ahead, like over this, to say these milestones would happen, and nobody could put something over the top of something else that would confuse another department or the field. Okay. Because when you've got too many things coming at you, you can't keep one thing moving forward. So there was clarity that a change was going to happen, and that these other departments wouldn't do something else on top of the change that was happening. Okay. So then there was an agreement of, okay, we're going to start with the monitoring first, and slowly said we're going to start moving through this process. Okay. So everybody was clear on the process. So each process that started rolling out, what we did was we made it a participatory process with the field and the headquarter team. And because it affected the field first, we created small groups with the field team. So we had like a field advisory and a headquarter advisory where we create drafts. So any changes that we create in protocols and processes, we first created a team with the field, a team with headquarters, created a draft, rolled out the draft, had trainings, traveled everywhere, showed it to everybody. And then we had a period of using it and giving feedback before we rolled it out. And then we go on to the next part until we got a whole section done, and then we'd roll it out. And so it was a process of, we knew we were changing 60 years of processes or somewhere where there was nothing. And so we would slowly do it by sections and then roll it out, and never without the blessing of the senior leadership saying, this is it. You now have to do it. You have given input into it. At some point, David, we had like 600 pieces of feedback we had to check off that were integrated. And we had to show that we had looked at feedback from all of these people. Because it was on a timeline and we kept moving forward, we did it all. And every single change that went through happened. They tried to do this various times in the past. It never stuck. Everything stuck. And I think it stuck for a few reasons. One, we could never have gotten it right without getting feedback from the people who were using it. We couldn't, because we didn't have all the information. So we needed their feedback. Two, we needed executive leadership to sign off and make it policy. Three, it had to be communicated throughout the entire organization, so nobody could get around not using it. People felt respected and people felt proud when they used it, and they spoke up to say, I used it, because they knew their bosses were behind it 100%. And so they were proud of using it, and they felt their performance was going to be seen as positive because of it. So I would use that approach again and again and again. And it's amazing that they're in a completely new place, and they are par with the competition right now and bringing in restricted funds.
Well, there you go. The results speak for themselves, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, but I can tell you, I went head to head with people over and over again, because people were, why do I have to change that? I don't have to change that. And I'd have to explain, and I explained. And then, I would bring case studies. The other thing that happened, so let me mention this. When you have so much resistance at certain times, you have to just stop. Sometimes when there's so much resistance, you just stop. And what you do is you go look for an early adopter, someone who believes in it. And you go and you do an application. And then you bring back the application and you show it. That's how I unlocked because I had a big organization, right? So I unlocked 4 or 5 issues with our senior leadership by doing that. So I found an early adopter in Senegal, and in Ecuador, for instance, that they didn't want to do an activity-based budget, okay, which we need to do to show donors how much money went towards each activity, which I never had to do before. So we ran an activity-based budget on one project, came back, showed it, how it was done, how it could go in the system. They saw it, realized it wasn't so difficult, okay, brought it up and used it. But if you get so much resistance, you're going to break if you don't back off. So try gently, try explaining, but then back off. Go find someone who's willing to adopt, an early adopter who's willing to try it, kind of under the radar. Try it, get your lessons learned, fix it if it needs to be fixed, and then bring it forward and have that person that did it explain it. And then usually it will get adopted because you applied it already. It works.
Yeah, I was going to ask the follow-up question about how do you handle resistance to change, but you've preempted me. Obviously, you know change so well. But
Well, things are always different, but I'll tell you, this was tough. I mean, I would say I learned a ton in these 5 years of how to manage change. And it was like every night I went to bed with a challenge, almost every night. And every morning I had to think about how to maneuver through a challenge. And it was always different because you're talking about a 60-year organization that never had to change. You're talking about a private sector approach now to programming and the fact that they're withholding money from these countries because they want change to happen. And lots of change happening. They feel quickly. I feel like it's so slow, like, I'm losing my life here. But for them, it's just very, very quickly. And I have to do it in a way where I'm not going to lose everybody. And I didn't lose anybody.
Yeah. And I think it's because of the way you've handled it, particularly that resistance piece. Cause I mean, being the change advocate, it's very easy, isn't it, to sort of lose sight of the people in the process. And as soon as you meet that point of resistance, you just think, right, I've just got to keep hammering away until I get through this wall.
Right. Yep.
But exactly as you said, often, usually, every time probably, that's the worst thing you can do.
It is the absolute, because here's the thing, people see what you do. And if people see that you're just going to hammer away at it, then they're going to do the very same thing. And then they're going to, and then people are going to be watching you. So if you take a different way through, they're not going to be so adamant at resistance next time. In fact, they may be the ones saying, okay, let's try it together. Because they know you're going to go find someone else to try it through, and so I've had people say, okay, Gretchen, I know you're going to go just find someone else to try to figure this out with. Let's just do this together. And then that's the best outcome, because then then that person knows their concerns are going to get incorporated into what we're going to work through. And something I'm most proud about is not losing anybody, because, the core of NGO work is heart, right? But I was bringing the mechanics and the heart together, and you can't just replace a heart, right? Well, okay. But, when you restructure a place, it's hard because you have to, you've got people who have been there quite a long time, and the question of, okay, you let them go, you bring in someone new, the cost of talent change and whatnot. It's a question, right? And you have to have competence and technical skills. Even in the NGO environment, when you go into restricted funding, you have to have skills to win proposals, right? To understand the objectives of all our different donors, to understand how to talk to companies and corporations, right? Not everyone can do that. You have to understand how to understand corporations, how to talk with them, how to understand how to make a pitch, right? And how to give buy-in from a company so they can trust you, because a lot of companies don't trust governmental organizations, right? With reason. To be able to make people understand, you need to build your competency, and you need to understand how to do this, that, and the other thing, and have them step up and say, I'm going to try and I'm going to do my hardest. That's pretty good.
Definitely. Yeah. I think leading from the heart with the heart as well as the brain, I think I do agree. I think it obviously that's almost a no-brainer. Mixing metaphors now in the NGO world, where that's kind of the purpose of a lot of people being there to start with, isn't it? But I think there's a big lesson for the private sector there as well in terms of how they manage change, especially in the really contentious ones like the restructuring and that whole thing. Because in the private sector, I think it can be a lot easier for people to just be like, well, okay, we're a commercial organisation. If you're not going to go with the change, then you're going to go. Bye. And it's very easy to do that. Well, depending on which country you operate and labour laws and so on. But psychologically, it's easier to do that in the private sector, I think. But actually, when you do that, you are incurring a higher cost, because the cost of replacing someone is like 300% of their salary, I think was the last data I saw on that.
Okay. Like it is very high.
Yeah, it's expensive to do that, but also you're losing all their knowledge. You're having an impact on the team as a whole every time you let one person go. And in a big restructuring change, you might be letting a dozen or more go. And it just sends the wrong signal. You're not going to get everyone else bought into the change if they see that anyone who resists gets the sack.
Right. No, and you can become an advocate. Yeah. So basically, if you say to that person who's resisting, okay, well, help me through this. Help me. Where are your concerns? Help me through this. They can become your best advocate. Definitely. And then you don't have to worry about the rest resisting, because you now have an advocate.
Yeah, absolutely. And
the concern might be a real concern that as a manager, I can't see.
Yeah. And I think in my experience, they usually are, in fact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a much better way of doing it, I think. And it's back to a question of priorities again, isn't it? I think, it's a much nicer way to behave as well.
Well, people. So in any company, in any organization, any entity, I don't care if you're a corporation, a B Corp, or nonprofit, it doesn't matter. People are your biggest asset at the end of the day. People, they are your biggest asset. And if you know how to bring people together and do great things, you will make money and you will have impact and you will have a great reputation. Bottom line.
100%. Yeah.
And it's not all about HR. It's not. I think it's about treating people and the management and giving people, as you rightly said, purpose, and giving people the purpose, the passion, and a want to be there. Because my understanding too now is that people will stay for a team and for a manager that respects them before they'll jump to go get a higher salary, and because it means something anymore.
Yeah, I'd like to believe that as well. I think as times get more trying economically, that becomes less true, perhaps.
Yeah.
But certainly there's going to be a baseline level, isn't there, of if you're paying them enough that they feel they're being valued, then definitely.
Well, and benefits. I mean, if you're offering benefits and a great environment and an enabling environment of empowerment, and I think that's what managers can do too. If you give everyone something that gives them joy and they feel empowered, like they're learning something new, something that empowers them, that they feel they're learning and they're growing as professionals and as individuals, they have some kind of flexibility that they need for their family or their education and growth. That empowerment speaks. That empowerment, that flexibility, those benefits, like for healthcare and whatnot, really speak to, how you feel about your employees. And I have spoken to various people recently who have said, I will never leave a company because the benefits are just too good. And I know that I will always be taken care of. Because if I take a chance and go to another company, I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I'm sure that is true, definitely. I think it comes down to a word that's come up a few times now, which is trust and respect, And the value, the reward conversation is maybe a bit of a sideshow to that, but it is part of the same story, isn't it? Because part of feeling respected is feeling that you're being rewarded appropriately for the value that you contribute. Part of being trusted is that you're empowered and given the autonomy to do your job in the way that you think is best. And you're not constantly being micromanaged. It is all, I think, part of the same big picture, let's call it. But yeah, it's still surprising to me how many people get that wrong, though, because it doesn't feel like it's that complicated. But Maybe it is. I don't know.
Well, there are different ways, that companies' culture and managers' way of working are definitely. And I've worked for both. I've worked for people who are very empowering. I've worked for people who are just plain hands off, which is not good either. And yeah, no. And then I've worked for people who are such terrible micromanagers. You feel like you're suffocating. And, it's just finding the right place, and creating the right environment. And I think it's, you never know either until you get in somewhere and see what it's like. I just hope that no matter what I'm doing going forward, I can help create that enabling atmosphere that provides joy, provides direction, empowerment, and gives people the tools to do what they do best, right? And allow both a company, organization to thrive and all of their teams as well, because that's when everything goes well.
I think there's something to be said as well for those kind of individual differences, aren't there? I think everyone's going to respond differently. Everyone's going to manage slightly differently based on their personality, their past experiences and all of that. But
right.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I have to say, I think based on this 2 hours talking to you nearly, I think you're very well placed to do exactly that for leaders in whatever organizations you end up working with. So,
well, thank you.
What's been your own best experience of being led?
I was sent to Malawi. And when I was in Malawi, I was told you have a project from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. You have $2.5 million, but you can only have that $2.5 million if you can find a match of $2.5 million from a corporation. And of course I said, yes, I'll take the job. So I put everybody on the plane, went to Malawi. I had absolutely no idea where the money was going to come from. I got there and I went and I knocked on the missions door, the USAID's U.S. Agency for International Development, the missions door. And I said, I'd like to talk to someone in the mission department for USAID. And the attaché came forward and I said, well, who can I speak to here? And they said, well, we have the economic growth officer. And so he came and we talked, and he became an amazing mentor because he believed that the private sector needed to come in to support this project to help create sustainability for this project that Land O'Lakes was managing. And he was actually the one who had been holding back until he could see who was going to come in and manage the project. And so he said, okay, Gretchen, this is the thing. You're going to call General Mills, and General Mills is going to give you this money, but you're going to partner, and you're going to partner to create small, medium enterprises out of all the different enterprises that are needed with local input suppliers to make the dairy value chain sustainable locally. Are we good with that? And I said, absolutely. But I need your help. I need your partnership. He said, I'm there. I'm beside you. We'll call General Mills up. We're going to get that money in here, and you and I are going to make this happen. And we did. He taught me so much. I'm so grateful for what he taught me. And he has retired now from USAID, but I am so grateful for that experience because, again, to this day, everything I learned from him is what I carry with me. And he was before his time, meaning I got to do some of the work before my time, but he had my back with the U.S. government. And it is down in the books as one of the most successful projects before its time. And I'm so very lucky to have met him when I did. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, great story. And
I'm just blessed.
Yeah, and it, I mean, it's a really great illustration of the power of mentorship as well, which again, I think is something that the private sector maybe doesn't quite. I mean, it's coming around. It's better than it used to be, but it's not quite as explicit as maybe it needs to be, I think.
Yeah. Always be open. That's all I can say is always be open to anyone being your mentor, whether they're older, younger, whatever sector they come out of. Always be open because they're there. If you are open, if you have the attitude to let them in and help you and learn, they're there.
Absolutely. And now it's time for my favorite question.
Okay.
It's called Leadership Heroes.
Leadership Heroes.
So if you had to pick one person, and it could be anyone you like, they could be alive, dead, past, present, real, or even fictitious, if you like. But it needs to be somebody who, in your opinion, would perfectly embody leadership. Who would that person be and why?
Well, it's, for me, absolutely Nelson Mandela.
Okay.
27 years imprisoned. And yet his heart did not harden. He came out to become president and to abolish apartheid and to bring reconciliation to South Africa. I don't know how he kept his faith. I don't know how he was able to continue the work that he had set out that he wanted to do for South Africa, but he did. And he is a hero that I hope I can. I don't want to be in jail for 27 years, but I hope that if there ever comes a day that I am faced with something as traumatic as that, I can be as strong-willed as Nelson Mandela and still make all the right choices and do all the right things that he showed the world that he can do.
Yes, he's quite a popular choice for this question, and I think the reasons why are pretty obvious.
Okay. Yeah, but he's always one that comes to mind. He just has such a strong spirit, strong mind. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean the change that he achieved. We've been talking about change for half the episode, haven't we?
Yeah.
And it's such a great example of achieving change in the right way. I think it's hard to say without knowing more about South African history than I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of the things that he said about leadership as well really stand out to me, like the role of the leader in danger versus safety and all that sort of aspect of it. So much to learn from him.
I mean, and I think people will be talking about Nelson Mandela for forever. I mean, we haven't seen someone like him do something like this for quite some time.
I think you're probably right. It'd be nice to think that's because the times haven't called for it, but I'm not sure that's true.
I hear you with that one.
Yeah. Well, anyway, either way, great choice. Thank you. There's only one other small thing that I always ask at the end, and that is if any of the listeners would like to learn more about you, perhaps get in touch, hear more about your business, or if anything that they've heard today, they just want to know more, how can they get in touch with you and learn more?
Yep. So my website is www.gretchenvillegas.net. And on there is my email address, my phone number, and everything. Yep. Just reach out to me and I can provide lots of information.
I'll pop that website in the show notes as well so people can find that easily.
Awesome.
Lovely. Well, that's all we've got time for. Thank you, Gretchen, so much. It's been such a wonderful conversation. I've learned so much. It was really interesting hearing about your career history as well. So, what a remarkable career it's been too.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, David. And please stay in touch. I'd love to stay in touch. For sure.
Likewise.
All right. Take care.
Gretchen, thank you again so much for your time today. Wonderful meeting you. Loved our conversation. I know I say that every week, listener, but it is true every week as well. And to the listeners, thank you for being with us. I hope you got loads of useful knowledge out of that conversation. Don't forget to visit the link in the episode description, learn more about Gretchen and her work, and I'm sure she'd love to hear from you as well. So do reach out if you'd like to learn more. You can now join the Integrity Leaders online community. If you are a new or struggling leader, whatever size or shape your organization takes, whatever the struggles or challenges that you're facing as a leader may look like, come along, join the community, benefit from a network of other leaders, as well as our regular sessions, workshops, other content as well, and of course, early access to this podcast every week. You can now join for 50% off because you are a listener of the podcast. And that's 50% forever, for as long as you remain a member. It's not just the first month and then done. You can do so by using the code HALFOFF24. So that's the words half and off, all in caps, and then the numbers 2 and 4. So pop that in the promo code box when you get to the checkout, and that will, as I say, give you 50% until you leave, or forever if you don't. Hope to see you there very soon. Thank you once again for being with us today. I hope you'll join me again next week when I'll be talking with my next guest, Mandy Bowsmith, about the role of micro-coaching and the impact it could have on your leadership. So if you don't know what micro-coaching is, come along next week and find out. That's all from me today. See you again next time. And until then, be a leader, not a boss.